All right, so I'm delighted to introduce Edmund, our colleague from the Department of Government and International Studies, who's going to talk about state power and corporatism, corporatist governance in Hong Kong, structure, agents, and mechanism. I think he's going to have a PowerPoint. Here's a PowerPoint on. Now the microphone system seems to be working now. We had some problem earlier. So I think without further ado, I give you the floor, and I think you can use the microphone here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Capison. So thanks again. Today I'm going to talk about, the original title is State Power and Corporatist Governance, but somehow I will actually focus more, not on the political structures, because I think a lot of speakers will talk about it, and I'm more interested in focusing more about the evolutions of the state protest responses. I mean, in the way that we adapt towards the popular protests that happened in these few years. As you can see from this picture, it was taken from during the umbrella movement in 2014. And you can see, the statement there is that let civic disobedience continue until true universal suffrage comes. And now, 3 years into this momentous movement, I think we know that democracy is going to be a distant future in Hong Kong. But at the same time, I think what is more interesting is that actually civic disobedience and also street protests are increasingly difficult to be organized in Hong Kong because of the more adaptive regimes that we are seeing. And so that will be the subject that I would like to discuss further, about the mechanism in which the state learned to adapt to these protests. Okay, great. So basically my question is about, I will try to slim down because my paper is more dense, but I will focus more in this presentation about the mechanism, to which enable the hybrid regimes, that is Hong Kong. It is not entirely authoritarian, but at the same time, it is certainly not that democratic. To enable it to have certain kind of coordinated strategies to absorb, erode, and also suppress the oppositions. Those on the street and those in the parliament. So I think in a way, because it is, the Hong Kong case is unique in the sense that because we used to have a tradition of rule of law and also a very vibrant civic society. So how the state, how to interact with these so-called institutions and bureaucracies of democracy and able to advance its agenda. This will be a puzzle, and that will be something that I would like to address in these presentations. First of all, I would like to point out that actually traditionally, the idea of state protest response has been raised out by the sociologist Charles Tilly, in which he suggests that there are normally 3 types of response. Basically, repressions, conceptions, and tolerations. This, I think, is roughly quite easy to understand. But traditionally, the idea of so-called toleration is a little bit understudied or under-theorized. Because it's simply, people consider toleration as state inactions. But what we've learned from the Hong Kong cases is that it's more proactive. It is not really ignoring protests or really tolerating protests, but see a variety of more coordinated strategies to weed out the strength of protests and also their influence in the society. That is something we would like to focus more on these presentations. So in a way, I think the outcomes, as we can see from the protest response, is that some institutions and bureaucracies of democracy or open society seems to be more vulnerable and fragile, than we commonly assumed because of this proactive and situational response from the state. In other words, the state is not only very passive in terms of facing these challenges. It actually self-mobilize, demobilize, and counter-mobilize in face of this. So I think it somehow provides a new angle for us to understand how state interact with these kind of social forces. Because traditionally, mobilization seems to be only present in authoritarian and totalitarian regimes. Okay, I mean, they have so many agency and tools. It is very much a top-down approach towards protest. Okay, through youth league, through mass organizations, through women organizations, for example, in Communist China. But then, I think after 1990s, okay, with so many communist regimes being torn down because of the democratizations in Eastern European and also in Southeast Asia, we have a new regime type called competitive authoritarianism, okay, and in which they are more adaptive. At the same time, they have electoral democracy, but at the same time, civil liberties and street protests are somehow being managed in a more efficient and effective manner. Okay, and in a way, I mean, we do see this Hong Kong moving a little bit towards that direction, based on something what happened in recent years. Okay, that is something we would like to focus on. And in a way, I think, I'm not sure, as the students of Hong Kong politics, we are very much concerned about there's no comparative cases of doing Hong Kong studies in the past. Okay, Hong Kong is unique, okay, in a sense. But now, I'm not so sure it is fortunate or unfortunate that it seems that Hong Kong has more comparative angle to be compared with Putin's Russia or some authoritarian or semi-authoritarian state in Southeast Asia. Okay, that is something that this presentation probably try to imply. So basically, I think regime counter-mobilization is always a black box. Okay, it's not very easy to be observed. So this presentation or my paper will focus on a number of sources in order to try to trace the trajectory and the process of that regime response. Okay, so we interviewed some politicians and journalists because they have first-hand knowledge about this regime response, and also because they have this first-hand data. Sorry, I think okay, is that better? Okay, and then we also analyze some official data to make sure that we have some important valid data, and then at the same time we try to observe when there are so many instances of counter-mobilization, so that we can know their logics and also their connections and what kind of repertoires they are favoring and the changes of that. And somehow we found there are actually two types. Okay, basically some are really stay-at-doors. Okay, they have clear connection with the state. But for the majority counter movement that we are seeing in Hong Kong nowadays, they seem to be citizen-based. Although they have connection with the elites, but they try to present that they are neutral. Okay, that is something very unique that we find in Hong Kong, though are not completely unique when we compare with other competitive authoritarian regime cases. So I will not tell too much about Hong Kong's regime context, but I think basically there are two major phenomena. One is the central-local contradictions, okay, because they are the Beijing central government, the SAR government, and the so-called regime elites. So they have different interests, and they somehow compete for power. And in the past, because of this competition, it somehow actually creates certain kind of bargained autonomy in Hong Kong, enabling Hong Kong's government and also to preserve certain autonomy in ruling society. Okay, and the boundary between the state and civic society, we do see certain kind of clear cut in the past. But now, because of the protest, I mean, Beijing is more considered Hong Kong because of the rise of these protests, which somehow create instabilities and also some elite defections, as we can see in 2003, James Dean's defection, leading to the dropping of the Article 23 legislation. And from that moment, I think the idea that autonomy and sovereignty is very much a zero-sum game has been advocated, okay, by the official discourse. And that is something that is unique, and that is in a way that you can see that the regime is learning from protest and responding to protest. But at the same time, I think there's another contradiction that we have to focus on. It's about the liberal autocratic one. Okay, is that, yeah, we have civil liberties, rule of law, and all these things, and then you have the half of the legislative council, which is democratically elected. So they still need to take care of the public opinion and all this. But at the same time, we do see the state learning to somehow commodify, okay, the informal networks, and also politicize some legal institution in order to achieve its agenda to contain the streets. Okay, and in a way, the positive outcome, of course, is from the state's perspective, that all this seems to be able to achieve certain kind of positive outcomes. So this is a conceptual graph that will try to tell you about what are the variables that will somehow shape regime's protest response. Okay, basically there are actually three variables. The first is regime type. Okay, that we already talked about. But I think there are two major variables that are important. It's about the goal of the protest group, whether the claims are acceptable by the regime. Okay, and if you ask for two more and the regime cannot really deliver, okay, of course, but at the same time, while the strength of the protest group is very weak, then normally we will see repressions, as we can see in early 2014. Okay, the firing of the tear gas, or before that, they arrested a lot of protesters. So these are the traditional way that they respond. But then, because the firing of the tear gas attracts so many angry citizens on the street, okay, it quickly shifts to attrition, to wear down protests. The state immediately stepped back. Okay, and it allowed other or outsourced other non-state actors to interact with the protester. Okay, I think this kind of trajectory and this kind of tactics, in a way, we have seen actually evolved from 2014 until now. Okay, and becomes the dominant way the state respond to protests. Of course, before that, we do see some concession. For example, Article 23. For example, the 2012 patriotic educations. Okay, but in most of the time, because when the size of the protest and the claims are not that serious, they simply ignore it. Okay, that is the traditional response. So I will not go into details about this table because, but what we want to show is that actually a lot of these so-called counter-mobilization strategies or counter-mobilization agencies, in a way they are easily co-opted because of the Hong Kong's cooperative structures. So as long as the regime is able to maintain elite cohesions, okay, all these other tactics, okay, attrition strategy, focus on the court, and also counter-movement in the grassroots, all these can be easily practiced and managed as long as it maintains elite cohesions. And so the first structural condition to enable all these strategies to take place is elite cohesion. And we can see that from 2003 until 2014, there are a number of attempts that the state tried to make sure that the tycoon will make the public transcript to show that they will follow the order of Beijing and they will be the loyal patriotic force. This is one important element. And so I will focus a little bit on this. And because I think divided elites, as we can see in all kinds of leading to regime change or leading to concessions in other areas, is a very important and first thing that the regime wants to maintain. Because the divided elite somehow create opportunity for the mass. And it gave new momentum to the protest. So as we can see in 2013, James Cheng's defection was really the reason that the Hong Kong government tried to not continue to legislate Article 23 because they still actually want to continue after the mass-scale protests. Okay, that is something that we have to be aware of. And in 2014, James Cheng once again tried to be the naughty boy. Okay, and he actually asked C.Y. Leung to consider step down in order to respond to the protest. But then immediately, actually the next day, he was sacked. Okay, from the CPPCC, Cheng Xie. And this was a very public signal sent to all the political elites that you must stay with the official line. If not, you will be punished. Okay, and I think it is not only limited to political elites because I think a lot of social or even artists who support the umbrella movement during 2014, they see themselves, they couldn't get jobs, they couldn't get conference, they could not enter mainland China. Or this. So this kind of punishment is quite effective and the signal is strong. Okay, that is something that was very unique. And basically the logic is, but at the same time I think the logic is very nuanced. Nuanced in the sense that it must be very severe, okay, to issue credible threat. But then it's not severe enough to to trigger off systematic defections. Okay, so while James' team was removed, he was still considered as a member of so-called patriotic force. So in other words, they try to manipulate this kind of elite so that they will not really try to think of other alternatives or become the so-called third force to work against the government and also work between the government and also the democracy. So in other words, I think they still have a lot of differences within the pro-regime camps, but then this kind of structural differences is somehow being managed by some instrumental and temporary alliance against the street protesters, and in which, because of it, they can actually use the elite-sponsored association to conduct a lot of counter-mobilization strategy that we're going to discuss further later. So these are the first step to ensure the structural stability in the regime, and then they can go on with other tactics. So the second one, I think, before we go into some details about how this tactic developed, I think it's important that the ideological front is emphasized. And I try to quote some newspaper, okay, for regime independence and also state-run newspaper to see how they report the umbrella movement. And you see some interesting finding here, okay. First of all, in terms of the cause, of course, the two major frames is foreign interference and disruption of public order. Okay, this one is what I call nationalistic frame, and the second one is a legalistic frame. And the nationalistic frame is interesting because it somehow also deterred the diffusion of Hong Kong's movement to mainland China, at the same time mobilize the mainlanders' support to the government's strategy to co-opt and respond to protest. Okay, I haven't the data to show that part, but I would like to focus more on the legalistic frame because it will be somehow respond to Michael's presentation and also some legal tools that the government used to evoke protests later. I think you can see here, it's actually the People's Daily and Global Times are somehow actually more, more adaptive than we commonly assumed. Okay, you actually talk about dialogue. Okay, try to make sure that the protesters should talk to the government. But then it was actually in a way, the one most reactionary, you may call, is actually the Oriental Daily in Hong Kong, that it called for Beijing's direct intervention to end the protest. So in a way, you see this kind of, Hong Kong still have this kind of autonomy or a very unique structure in the sense that the way the Beijing government responds to protest is somehow different from the pro-regime force in Hong Kong. Because the pro-regime force, they can actually take an even more hard-line approaches sometimes. Okay, but Beijing, they have a lot of different calculations. But of course, the independent media, they will not only talk about instrumental way, they actually talk about government accountability, social reform program to end the protests. But as you can see, all this are of course not something that we focus on now. Actually, the legalistic frame becomes so strong after the protests and somehow justify a lot of government proactive response towards the protests afterwards. Okay, and in a way, I think, of course, the media framing, not only in newspaper, also, of course, in social media, somehow work effectively towards that end. So, I think, of course, the most interesting development in Hong Kong, in a way, is that you see the state actually penetrate more into the society. Okay, and in a way, and these kind of things happened since 2009. First, as you have some spontaneous citizen-based organized civic society group try to support the government. Okay, but then gradually their targets evolve into oppressed popular protests. And you can see the tactics that they are using are very much similar to the activists used by the activists. So they use parade, they use demonstration, sometimes they use sit-in. And the scale are somehow proportional and respond to the scale of protests in the society. But I think at the same time, they are actually using a lot of vocabulary and language that's been used by pro-democracy force. For example, when you talk about freedom, your love to Hong Kong, they are also talking about all this. So I find it somehow trivialize the claims of the pro-democracy claims, and people get somehow a little bit annoyed. I just want to call these, I mean, all these are the typical counter-mobilization movement. Some appealing to the middle class, so they are more, they would tend to focus on seminar and all this signature campaign. Some are a little bit more militant and violent because they are appealing to different audience. But I want to show you this code, which was given by a Hong Kong legislator, okay? And actually, who is still, he was not seated, okay, so he's still electrical. I think what he said is that they really feel this kind of pressure because the traditional supporter, okay, they are asking them to step back because they know that this counter-mobilizers are attacking the protesters. But at the same time, they raise this question that why they attack you? Because you go on the street at the first place. So they want to restore order, they want to maintain a harmonious neighborhood. So somehow the traditional supporter of democratic camp also become the agents, try to convince the pro-democracy supporter that you should stay calm, and you should not support, and you should not mobilize. So these are the challenges that are being faced by pro-democracy camp. So basically my argument is that all these are somehow incentivized by a hardline approach because we don't see a very clear linkages between all these pro-democracy counter-mobilization movement, their linkage with the state. Although some of them are supported by pro-regime elite, but we do see that the growth of this kind of pro-regime counter-movement in response to protests. Only some of them, a limited number of them here you see is the blue one, is those endorsed by the state. They tend to be conducted by a regime politician, maybe with some scholar, respected key opinion leader. Only these are endorsed by the state and recognized by the state retrospectively. But most of these counter movements are these in dark green. I mean, they are citizen-based. In other words, it's very difficult for you to control. Okay, and at the same time, the state seems to be, they can claim that all these are the contention within the society. It doesn't have any role to do it. And it doesn't, but at the same time, the outcome of this citizen-based counter movement, in a way, help the state to advance their agenda, okay, to manage the society and to increase the cost of protest participations. Finally, I would like to talk about the legal intervention aspect, but because it has been covered by Professor Michael Davis, I just want to focus on two things. Is that, first of all, is that we do see there are more severe offense with severe penalty being charged towards protesters since it didn't really happen since 2014 because as I said, I mean, the regime strategy actually changed from 2003 because of the July 1st rally. And you can see actually the protesters, they are going to suffer from more severe penalty because the audience used to charge for their offense are actually more severe. Okay, and at the same time, one should know that actually the public order ordinance that so many protesters now facing actually was being created in 1967's riot, and it has not been ratified and because of the regime's control, and it becomes a tool, okay, used by the regime to enact this kind of thing. At the same time, I think in a way I would agree with Michael's saying that it is very much targeted. I mean, some of the protest leaders, because if you compare what happened in 2006, when Hong Kong has the first large-scale occupation in Queen's Pier, at that period of time, there are more than hundreds of protesters occupying the space. But only 2 protesters was actually finally arrested and charged. And those are not the public figure that we know. Those are the middle-aged, middle class. Okay, and through litigation, one of them actually gone bankrupt. But no one knows it. But at the same time, as you can see, they are not targeting the young protest leaders because they have a public space and they are afraid of the civil society's backlash. But now it seems to change, as I said, because of the because of the typology they're using, and because of the strength of the street has decreased. So basically, I think the conclusion that I would like to draw is that, of course, regime like Hong Kong, I mean, it's a hybrid regime. Okay, it cannot deploy cohesive force as readily as an autocracy. But at the same time, it doesn't really have this kind of representative mechanism to absorb protest. Okay, they will not conceal. Because when they conceal and to protest, it somehow seems to demonstrate the weakness. And of course, it's not neither the Beijing's or the Hong Kong governments, they do not see that as at their advantage. But at the same time, they do see both defensive and offensive strategies. Okay, to wear out the protest. Because I don't have enough time, I will not go into details. But I think that the very successful way we see the government response is that it still keep a distance, okay, with the protester. And you can say that I focus on managing some governance issue, okay, to resolve the deep-rooted problems in Hong Kong. But at the same time, how to respond to protests are being allocated to the court and allocated to this counter movement. But of course, the result of it is that the court and the civic society, okay, the two most important institutions of prerogatives of democracy or open society in Hong Kong, are very much being eroded in this proactive and situational protest response. And I think this is something that we're going to face in the years to come. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thanks a lot, Edmund. Great. I take away from your presentation a number of things, which are, I think, 3 points. First of all, I think polarization of the society, the communities, clearly obvious to all of us. The second thing is, with hybrid regimes, what you're saying is this, I'm sure we're going to come back to that, there's kind of equilibrium reached, which manages the authority actually, which allows the authorities to manage protests and to keep a much stronger position in the game. And the final point is erosion of civil society. Whether I would add a question mark to that, because whether an erosion of civil society maybe remains to be seen, but that's a very good point you've made. And it's a very nice kind of transition to the next speaker, Cheng, who